These Pittsburgh Penguins, Hunter, I'll tell you, they sure like yapping. Kyle Dubas and Sidney Crosby, well, they had a lot to say. We're going to talk about that and more on this edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Tuesday edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Patrick Damp. You can follow me across all social media platforms at synonym for wet. Joined as always by the one and only Hunter Hodes. You can give him a follow on Twitter. You can give our show's Twitter account a follow at LO_Penguins. You can also find us on Instagram at LockedOn_Penguins. And of course, we appreciate you making us part of your daily routine. Don't forget, we're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. And if you follow us on YouTube, be sure to hit the notification button. That way you can be among the first to know when we drop our daily Monday through Friday episodes. We have got a lot to get to on this Tuesday edition of Locked On Penguins because, as I said in the opener, Kyle Dubas made an appearance on Jeff Marek's show, The Sheet, which fantastic listen. Dubas talks to Marek for about 45 minutes about everything from the Penguins' plan to rebuild, Sidney Crosby rumors, what the state of the league is. He also, I won't spoil this one because we are going to spoil a little bit of it. He tells the story behind the viral photo of him with two phones and what happened there. He actually remembers exactly what happened. It's an awesome story. You should check it out. So we'll start with that. And then in the second segment, we're going to talk about more of what Sidney Crosby had to say when he was delivering season tickets, because it wasn't just the trade rumors he got into. He had quite a bit to say about the Penguins, the future, and everything in between. So let's start with Kyle Dubas. I want to begin, Hunter, with this quote. Marek essentially asks him, where's the rebuild at? Where is this going? What do you see happening? And Dubas says the following: we don't put any timelines on it because we're trying to do that as urgently as we can. So we haven't come out and said it's an X amount of years plan because we talked about development and what younger players are capable of. And we're trying to find every edge that we can to get back into that mix in our division and then within the league. He also brought up a couple of players who you and I have brought up on this show a couple of times, and that is players such as Avery Hayes and Owen Pickering, saying that Pickering came up last year, played well. Avery Hayes has been a solid addition in the AHL, coming off a good prospect tournament performance. So I like this from Kyle Dubas because, one, we know not all rebuilds are built the same. Sometimes it's going to take 5 to 10 years. Sometimes, in the case of division rival Capitals, 2 to 3 years. Sometimes, if you're Buffalo, it's going to take 15 or more. But realistically, not tying himself to a specific time period and building up expectations that he might end up failing. Granted, like we have been saying, we eventually got to see some more progress here, but if you put a timeline on it and you fail to meet it, you've set yourself up for failure.
And you're going to make a lot of fans upset if you say, oh, this is going to take 5 years. You get to year 5, you're still not even close to contending, let alone making the playoffs. You're going to make a lot of the fans mad, and the fans are going to really start turning on you at that point. So I'm totally fine with them not really putting a timeline on it. It's just, whenever they feel like they are ready to take the next step, and really mobilize this thing. In my opinion, I think they might start mobilizing at least a little bit next offseason. I know I said it this past offseason. I was dead wrong on that, so I'll take the L. But, considering how much cap space they have next offseason, it's more than double than what they had this past offseason. I think you might see some of the wheels in motion to try and speed it up a little bit. So I think it's wise to not put in X number of years. You also said it, Pat, and I've said this on the show as well. Not all rebuilds take the same. And I think at this stage of where the NHL is, I think you're setting yourself back if you're doing, the 8 to 10 plus year rebuild. I just think it takes too long. and B, you have no guarantee you're going to come out of it, successful. Now, granted, for rebuilds in general, it is really cool when you see it done right, and then you are contending for a while. Like you've seen that in other sports as well with other teams where they do a proper rebuild and it takes X number of years. Doesn't have to be 5. It could be like 2 to 3. They do it right. They come out of it. They start contending, and then they're contending for a decade plus. I think there is something special in seeing that, and I hope that we get to see that here. But I don't think he is, putting an exact timeline on it. I know that's probably going to upset Pat Brisson just because he called out the team last week. But if he thinks he's going to pressure Kyle Dubas, especially like after what Dubas said yesterday, I think he's gravely mistaken. Like Dubas basically said, hey, we're going to keep going down this path. We started this over a year and a half ago, and we're going to keep doing this, and we're going to see this through. Like he's not going to let the biggest agent in hockey, persuade him to do dumb signings and all that.
Right. The other thing I will say that is half a credit to Dubas and half just a credit of good luck is where the league is going and where the Penguins are, put them in a good spot to rebuild. First and foremost, you've got the rising salary cap. All your big names, your franchise players are locked up for the foreseeable future, so you don't have to end up paying them a ton of money. It's not like you're going to suddenly have to re-sign Sidney Crosby, who is no longer in his mid-20s, to some 8-year deal that's worth $13 million per year. You have some bad contracts, which is fair, but at the end of the day, they have a ton of cap space, a ton of draft picks. They've got a better prospect pool. So they're in a good spot for this to go just about any which way. So you don't really have to put a timeline on it because there are a lot of directions you could go. You could have it where some of these young guys develop ahead of schedule and they're ready to play in the NHL. That's the ideal. You could also have it where some of these guys don't work out. They just become dudes, and you still have a ton of picks. You still have a ton of cap space. So they're in a good spot. You also brought up Sidney Crosby and some of that stuff that's going on. This is also related to the rebuild, not even getting into the trade rumors, which Dubas basically said, hey, that's what the media is going to do. That's what fans are going to do. It's exciting. It's fun to talk about. So he doesn't begrudge them or doesn't even really think about it at all. But the other thing that he brought up was Crosby plays a big role in this rebuild because he has set such an example with the way he works, the way he carries himself. He specifically said, when development camp begins in July, Crosby is still in Pittsburgh and he's on the ice in the mornings. He's in the gyms in the afternoon. And a lot of these guys see a guy who is in his late 30s, is one of the best in the world. They're already starstruck because he's Sidney Crosby, but then they see his work ethic and they go, that's a high standard I'm going to have to meet in this organization.
And during development camp in July, Pat, did you see the video that was on their socials where all the picks are taking the picture in the locker room and then they see, holy crap, that's Sidney Crosby's jersey right behind them. And there's all of his equipment. Like they were starstruck because they were like, holy crap, like all of his stuff is out. Like, he's going to be, going on the ice pretty soon and all that. So like stuff like that means something to a lot of those prospects, like, and just to the organization in general. So I just wanted to add that because I felt like it added to what you were saying and how, again, like it really does help quite a bit. So those are my thoughts on that. I think everything Dubas said during those 45 minutes, I had that on at the same time as the Prospects Challenge game. So I had both the audio for the game and the interview going. I thought everything he said was totally fine. It's funny. He's pretty good with, a lot of his answers. It feels like he's been like, what's the word? Like media trained all these years, especially after being in Toronto for so long, you kind of have to be. So like, it's definitely, he's fun to listen to when he gets going for that long.
And that's one of the, I'll put more shine on him, even though he doesn't need it, especially from two goofs like us. But Jeff Marek is maybe the best in the business because he will get people like Kyle Dubas and other people in hockey who normally say a lot, but in that a lot is nothing. Right. It is a lot of gobbledygook. But when Jeff Marek gets going with someone, he gets them to have really good, really fun, interesting interviews. And the Dubas one is no exception. If you want to check that out, the show is called The Sheet. You can find it on all podcasting apps, just like us. Make sure you listen to us first, though. Don't you dare hit pause in the middle of this to go listen to it. Finish the rest of this show, because we still have plenty to talk about on this one, including Sidney Crosby's comments to the media during season ticket holder delivery. We will get into that when we come back right after this. Before we do that, though, we've got to tell you about today's first sponsor, and that is FanDuel. The NFL season is in full swing. We're 2 weeks in, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if that bet wins, they'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. FanDuel makes every game more exciting, whether you're enjoying a Steelers Sunday or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It's quick, it's easy, and the best way to add a little bit more energy to those NFL Sundays. So if you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Back here on the Tuesday edition of Locked On Penguins, I'm Patrick Damp, right alongside Hunter Hodes, and we went over it yesterday. Sidney Crosby putting the kibosh on all that trade rumor and all that trade talk sent out there by Pat Brisson. Seemed quite annoyed with his agent speaking out about that. But there were other things that he brought up. I'll start here before we get into some of the other stuff, because this part of Crosby's quote about why he's happy in Pittsburgh, in my estimation, did not get the same amount of play, understandably, about him quashing the trade rumors, because we've hinted at this. If you've read anything about Sid, he's talked about it, and writers have talked about it. It's not just that he enjoys the Penguins organization. It's not just that he feels intensely loyal to the Shield or anything like that. He loves the city of Pittsburgh, and he made this abundantly clear with this quote yesterday. I talk about the first day I arrived in Pittsburgh. I didn't know a lot about it prior to being drafted. I showed up at the airport and I could barely move. The support I've felt from day one, the relationships I've formed here, the memories, the teammates, the fans, go on down the list. I'm so grateful and thankful that I've had the opportunity to play here as long as I have. Anyone who knows me knows that the city means a lot to me and how special it is. So I think that has been getting lost a lot in the talk of this. It doesn't mean that a day could come where he wants to go chase a Stanley Cup. It's entirely possible. But at the same time, you can, if you just read that quote, sounds great. If you go listen to the video that pretty much every local media outlet in Pittsburgh got, he said that with his whole heart.
Right. And I think a lot of his quotes yesterday, especially that one and then denying everything, I think his goal for those specific quotes were to just quash anything that was out there in the media. And again, I've said on the show before that he gets annoyed when you ask him these types of questions. He had to know all those were coming yesterday just because of what Pat Brisson said last week. But you could tell he was really annoyed when some of these came in, because he doesn't want to keep answering this when he keeps making it clear that he doesn't want to go anywhere and that he loves it here, both team-wise and city-wise. Yeah, does he wish that the Penguins were contending this year? Oh, absolutely. I mean, the guy's won 3 Stanley Cups. He's been to 4. He's been to 5 Eastern Conference Finals. So, again, 4 Stanley Cup Finals, 5 Eastern Conference Finals. I should be specific when I say that. He's been in the playoffs almost his entire career. So, of course, he's going to try to win when he can. And, Pat, that leads me to my next point, where he was asked about tanking. And, yeah, he's not a fan, which obviously no player is a fan of that. Like, it doesn't matter what NHL player you are, Pat. You could be someone who has been in the league for as long as Sidney Crosby has and is a top 5 player of all time. You could be someone coming up from the AHL for the first time. You're a full-time NHLer for the first time this upcoming season, for example. And I'm sure that player would probably have the same answer. These players are not just going to tank games. Like, they are playing for A, pride, and B, especially contracts. Like, that they're playing because this is their job. Like, they're not just going to go out there and tank games. Now, management and coaching staffs, they can position themselves to maybe not have the best lineup on game nights. Doesn't mean the players are going to go out there and just quit right when the puck drops. And Sidney Crosby even said, that's not the game I know. Like, this is professional sports. That's part of the quote that he had. And yeah, and anyone thinks he's just going to, tank this season for the hell of it, you're gravely mistaken. I don't think anyone thought that anyway, but that was a really good quote. So Pat, he's very much on our line of thinking, especially, when you had that big tanking rant last season and the anti-tanking rant, Pat, he's right. He listened to that episode and he's right there with that one, but I like that one quite a bit. And then again, everything that he said about the city, I mean, he's been great both on and off the ice. The fans have loved him ever since he came here 20 years ago, and that's never going to change. So I really liked a lot of what he had to say. Like, you could tell he was really like, when I was watching that video, you could tell that he was really thinking about what he was going to say when he was getting these questions. It felt like that he had answers in his head, like knowing what questions he was going to get. And he had a set agenda being like, I'm going to quash all this and I'm going to show everyone that I still love it here and that I just don't want to go anywhere. So, and I think he accomplished that goal very well.
He did. And there's a connective tissue here between all of this, between Dubas's appearance on the sheet, Crosby's answers yesterday. And the biggest connection is what Dubas said about the young guys having to be in the same organization as Sidney Crosby, having to see his work ethic, the way he commits himself to the sport, despite being at the pinnacle of the sport for as long as he has. He still works like there's a chance Dubas is going to call him into his office and tell him that he's getting cut, which we know is never going to happen. But it also connects to what Crosby said about tanking. This is an organization that, yeah, expectations aren't high, but at the end of the day, they don't want the culture to fall into one that accepts losing, that accepts mediocrity. Now, the Penguins have had their struggles over the last few years. We're not going to sit here and say, no, don't believe your lying eyes and ears. The team's good, actually. They're not. But that is the end result of a team that got older, some other GMs, including the current GM, who have made some pretty bad missteps. But at the end of the day, the Penguins aren't changing their culture to, it's fine. We're not supposed to be good this year. If we lose a couple games in a row, go on a losing streak, it's no big deal. We missed the playoffs again. Whatever. We're not supposed to be good. They're not going to accept that. And I get, as fans, as analysts, it annoys us because we're looking at this with a different perspective. We're looking at this and saying they need to go get the first overall pick. They need to throw it all away and toss the last 22 years in the trash and forget everything that they've done. It's time to restart. And yeah, there's still a part of me that does believe that, because we know how difficult it is to build a team and a franchise in the NHL if you don't have that cornerstone. But at the same time, there are so many other cautionary tales of teams that do that and teams that didn't have the same level of success that the Pittsburgh Penguins did. Let's be real here. And they're still failing to launch. And again, I will come back to this point. If you have a good culture that says, listen, we understand that we might not be good. We might not be a playoff team. Hell, we're not even close to a contender. But you are going to play and you are going to work and you are going to give yourself the expectation that one day you will be. But to get to that point, you have to play like it. And it's so much better than we're just bad. We're fine with losing. We're fine with missing the playoffs. That culture is really, really difficult to shake. And having Sidney Crosby at the helm will keep you from sinking into that kind of culture.
that type of losing that you mentioned, Pat, the latter one, not the first one, the latter one, it's like a cancer. Like once you accept losing, it becomes very hard to get that out of your locker room. Look at Chicago recently, look at Buffalo, Detroit, for example, Anaheim. I'll also throw in there as well. Once you accept it and once you're like, we're fine with losing again, it's a cancer. It is very hard to get rid of. And as to your first point, when it comes to, losing, if you want to lose games this year, I want to see that fight. I want to see that effort, and I want to see the heart. Like, I don't want this team to ever be okay with, we lost this game. It's whatever. No, I want to see that fight that shows like, hey, this isn't okay, and we're going to keep trying to fix this. Again, I'm not expecting anything major this year. I've said that on the show repeatedly. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. But when they lose games this year, and I think they're going to lose more games than they win, I want to see the fight in a lot of those games that be like, hey, we're not letting that, that quote unquote loser culture into our locker room. We're doing the best we can just because we don't have that type of contending team, but we're still fighting night in and night out. That's what I would want to see this year.
And that's right where I am. And by the sound of it, that's right where the captain is. But that is going to do it for our middle segment. When we come back, we're just about 2 days away from training camp, ladies and gentlemen. So we got to get started talking about it. And there's an underrated storyline going into training camp that I'd like to talk to Hunter about. So I am going to make him talk about it when we get back right after this. Before we do that, though, we got to tell you about today's last sponsor, and that is Indeed. You just realized your business needs to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your post seen on hundreds of other job sites. Indeed's sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. Been a while since I've had to do an Indeed ad read, so I will say this. I've never been in the position where I've got to hire someone, but I'll tell you this much. I have been on the job hunt, and if it wasn't for Indeed, I wouldn't have my current full-time job, and I wouldn't have landed a bunch of interviews before I got my full-time job. Indeed put me in touch with plenty of employers, got me interviews, and found me the exact right fit. Now, if you're someone who does need to hire, you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this very podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring you need Indeed. Wrapping up the Tuesday edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast, I'm Patrick Damp, running alongside my good pal Hunter Hodes. And Hunter, we're just about 2 days away from training camp. You will be there on the ground, eyes in the sky, telling us everything that's going on in training camp. There is one thing, though, about training camp as we head into it that we've hinted at, but we haven't really dove into, that I think is an interesting wrinkle going into training camp. This team has a lot of forwards. You go to the Penguins website right now, and obviously there are some names on there because we haven't had camp yet. Everybody's considered a Penguin right now. There's names that we know are not going to be on the Penguins roster come opening night, including some names like Ben Kindle, obviously is not going to be on the Penguins, and a couple of others. But you look up and down the roster, there are a lot of forwards battling for not very many spots. I look at names like Valtteri Puustinen, Sam Poulin, even though we kind of know what he is, still part of the organization, Tommy Novak, Blake Lizotte, Joona Koppanen, and then you have your Boko Imamas, Danton Heinen, Kevin Hayes, Philip Hollander, and Noel Achari. All of these guys, we pretty much know that the top six, while not 100% set in stone, we've got a pretty good idea who's going to be in that. And then everybody else basically fighting for spots, mostly on the fourth line, because we know what the third line is going to look like for the most part as well. So there's a lot of competition going into camp.
First off, take Tommy Novak's name out of that list. I think he's 100% making this team. I don't think anyone would tell you.
Hunter, here's the thing. He got hurt, and yeah, he looked okay for 2 games, and he's been an okay forward in the NHL. Has he recovered? Is he going to make the team? It's an open question.
Recovery, maybe. Making the team, I don't think that's a question to me. I think I disagree with you on that respectfully. I think he is on this team this season. I would be stunned if someone like that does not make the team. I think he's going to be a Swiss Army knife this year who can play top 6, top 9 minutes. He's almost a 20-goal scorer in the NHL. If someone like that is not making the Penguins out of training camp, something's wrong. So respectfully, Matt, I love you. I just disagree with you on that. I think he's a lock for this roster. As for some of the other players that you mentioned, Hollander, Achari, Heinen, Kevin Hayes, etc. That's fair. Like a lot of those forwards in the bottom 6 are going to be battling for these spots. And, Rucker McGroarty, of course, Ville Koivunen, Avery Hayes, I think, is starting to jump into this conversation. Pat, he was tremendous at the Prospects Challenge. I think he was the best player on that Penguins team during those 3 games. And I think he's riding a lot of momentum into training camp. And I still think he has a lot of work to do to make the opening night roster. But at the very least, if he has a good camp and maybe doesn't make it, I think he can show management and the coaching staff, hey, I'm just about there, and I can be a potential call-up during the season, especially in the case of injuries. And then if he plays well, he can maybe just stay up for a while. So him, Tristan Brose, I also thought had a really good prospects challenge. He has his full confidence right now, as I've said. I think he's also riding a lot of momentum in a training camp. There's a lot of young players here really battling. And I know even without some of the young players that are listed on the roster, you look at the veteran forwards like, 12 plus, 13 plus. I don't think some of these veterans, as I've said, are going to just be given spots for the hell of it. There's a brand new coaching staff. So they're going to get to evaluate all these players. They have no loyalty to some of these veterans who have been here. Not obviously like the big ones like, Crosby, Malkin, Rust, Raquel, et cetera, but they're not going to be loyal to someone like a Danton Heinen, I don't think, a Noel Achari, or a Kevin Hayes, for example. If some of these younger pieces do enough to push 1 or 2 of those guys out of that lineup, they could waive them. So there you go. Like, I don't think some of these veterans in the bottom 6 are just going to be given spots. They're going to have to earn their playing time throughout this season. New staff, a staff that is focusing on development, especially for younger players. So honestly, I think that the younger player, they might be biased a little bit towards younger players just because that's what they're being brought in here to do, is develop some of these younger players. I don't think this is going to be the same staff that you see, 6 years from now when hopefully they're contending for cups. But this is still a staff that is prioritizing development. So that's a big storyline for me during training camp, is how will these veterans do against some of these young and up-and-coming players who are really starting to push for playing time this upcoming season?
Yeah, in the ones that kind of I don't want to say worry about, because that's not the right way to put it, but I look at your Noel Acharis, I look at your Danton Heinens, I look at your Kevin Hayes of the world and think they could be candidates for waivers, because that's just 3 players right there. And we know that I don't think there are 3 NHL ready after camp prospects, but like you said, a lot of them are riding a lot of momentum, whether it was for being really good down the stretch for the baby Penguins or being really good at the prospects challenge, which we have to make the obvious caveat of they're not playing actual NHLers. They're playing a bunch of other prospects. So you should temper expectation for some of those performances. But I look at those 3 and I wonder, how long are they for the Penguins organization? Now, at the same time, we know how volatile young players can be. They can have a week and a half where they look like they are ready to be NHL mainstays, and then the next 2 weeks they completely disappear, because that's part of the development process when you're not a franchise player. When you're not a blue chip prospect, you are going to have up and downs. You're going to have days where teams get the tape on you, they completely neutralize you, and then you're going to have days where you figure it out. So what I also am a little bit worried about, and this will kind of be our way to wrap it up here, is I think that Dubas and the coaching staff are also looking at some of these veteran forwards, and normally I would hate this, but I think it's kind of where you have to be. Looks at him as a safety net. If some of these younger guys struggle a little bit, underwhelm in camp, you got these guys to play, and then you can let the other guys cook, marinate, do whatever you want to do in the minors. And when they're ready, you can bring them up.
Right. I think that's totally fair. And again, they want Wilkes-Barre to be good this year. So there's really no problem with, say, for example, they do a lot during camp, but maybe not enough just yet. Okay, they can start down there, cook a little bit. I do know that Dubas likes the players down there to gel, but if injuries happen at the NHL level, which it's the Penguins, they probably will, one or two of those guys can come up for a little bit of an extended stretch just to see how they do against NHL competition. Not all these young players that we have mentioned are going to start in the NHL. Like, let's just put that out there. That is just not going to happen. I think there's still going to be some young players on this team, but it's not going to be all of them. That they just don't have enough room right now. Even if they were to like waive some of these veterans, Pat, they just don't have the room right now. So that changes obviously if you make other trades later on in the season, but right now they just don't have the room to call up, a ton of these players. But this is still going to be really good to see how close are a lot of these players. Like, Koivu and McGroarty, they should be NHL locks. I don't care how many veteran forwards there are. You make it work, especially if they have good camps, and I think they will. Other than that, Philip Hollander, we'll see. Avery Hayes, Tristan Brose, Valtteri Pustin, and Sam Poulin, we'll see. I think Pustin and Sam Poulin kind of are what they are right now in terms of their careers. I don't think you're going to get anything more out of them. But, Philip Hollander, I'm curious to see how he does, of course, at camp. Tristan Brose, Avery Hayes, as I said, they're riding a lot of momentum and they could potentially get some NHL playing time this year. But can they do enough to potentially make this roster at camp? That's going to be the question, at least for the forwards. Defensively, Owen Pickering, Harrison Brunick, Emil Pianiemi. I think Pianiemi, though, is starting in Wilkes-Barre. Pickering, I hope, makes the opening night roster, and then Harrison Brunick might be a year too early, TBD. So, yeah, a lot of fun to watch. It gets underway in less than 48 hours. 8:45 a.m. is the first practice on Thursday. I have to wake up like a normal person.
And Hunter will be awake. He will be in Cranberry. And make sure you're locked on this show because we are going to have our guy Hunter there, and he's going to let us know what he's seeing at camp. So make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you've got your notifications on because we're going to be a great place for you to follow training camp in just a couple of days. But that is going to do it for our Tuesday edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. For Hunter Hodes, I'm Patrick Damp. Thank you as always for tuning in, and we will be back on Wednesday.